Kicking us off here on BBC Radio Bristol. It's 8 minutes past 9. My dinner party guest is Laura Cramer, who's an Irish-born and Moscow-trained artist. I rather like that as a line. That's good. That fit neatly on Twitter. How are you, Laura?
Hi, good morning. I'm fine, thank you.
So you're now living here in Bristol?
Yes.
How long have you been in Bristol for?
I've been here for 15 years. Hard to believe, but yes.
Wow. So take us back to your roots in Ireland. Idyllic roots, idyllic growing up?
It was a paradise, yes. I grew up on the southeast coast of Ireland, not far from Rosslare, the port of Rosslare.
Okay.
And
in a little village we'll never have heard of?
It wasn't even a village. Well, yes,
Oh, wow.
It wasn't even a village. We literally were about 2 miles from our nearest neighbours,
Okay.
and we were perched on the coast.
What sort of a dwelling was it? Was it
The original part of the house was a mud cottage, a mud hut, that had a thatched roof. But then my father did extend it. We were all cramped together. So,
Wow.
but it was so close to the beach. It was a lovely kind of gentle sand duny drop onto the beach, and we would just scurry down there as kids and play.
How many of you in the family?
There were 4 girls in the family,
Uh-huh.
and so my father was fairly henpecked, I think. Poor guy.
And where did you fit in the pecking order?
I was the youngest.
Okay.
I'm the baby.
So
of the family.
in Russian doll's terms,
Absolutely.
you were the last one we discovered.
I was the
You
little-
were the original little Russian doll.
The little matryoshka, yeah.
So wonderful place to grow up in.
It was wonderful, yeah.
And did you, even as a child, did you take your little sketchbook down there and think about painting, or was that something that came much later?
It's not something that I think... I was too busy catching shrimp and bringing them up to the kitchen and cooking them and things like that, and just running feral to even think about that. And in fact, I think some of my other sisters showed more of an artistic talent than I did. It was more later as an adult that I realised, actually, when I went to the Soviet Union, that I just felt that it was what I wanted to pursue as a career.
And now you have kids of your own. Do you allow them to run feral? I always mention, people who listen to this program get bored of me saying it, but my most depressing piece of research ever was a study that found that young people could identify 100 corporate logos but not 5 wildflowers, which
yeah.
suggests they're spending an awful lot of time staring at a screen. With your kids now, do you kick them out and let them run feral, or do you...
I try to, but in an 80-foot suburban garden, it's not so easy.
Not quite so
easy.
But there's amazing what you can do in an 80-foot suburban garden.
It is. We're doing our best.
Yeah.
We're even... My husband is even considering becoming a beekeeper. I don't know what our neighbours are going to think to that. We thought about chickens, but I think they'd muck up the garden too much.
So growing up in rather idyllic rural Ireland, and your school, what was that, a walk or a bus ride or a how?
It was a long bus ride for
right.
someone who suffered car sickness. It was very unpleasant. In fact, it was more unpleasant for everyone else around me rather than me.
Okay,
but,
we don't need to go into that.
No, indeed. It was. I wasn't particularly happy at school. But I preferred just to be down on the beach.
Okay, so you went to school and presumably secondary school as well?
Secondary school to what's called leaving certificate level, which
Okay.
is the equivalent of A-levels over here. For someone who didn't have vision, I did okay in my exams, but because I didn't know what to do then, I decided I had an opportunity to move to Denmark and work as an au pair. So I travelled to Denmark as a fresh-faced 17-year-old with tears in my eyes as I left Dublin Airport. I didn't really want to go.
And what was that like? Because au pairing can go either way, can't you? It can look great on paper and you can end up with people who work you to the bone, and all sorts of peculiar things are going on in the house, or it can be a brilliant existence. What was yours like?
I was very lucky. I ended up working for a couple who ran the management training company called Time Manager International.
Oh, wow.
If you remember the Filofax in the kind of mid-80s, well, Time Manager was their kind of hot competition. And Klaus Müller, my kind of Danish father at the time, he was interviewed on TV and asked if he had one Rolls-Royce. And he said, no, actually, I don't. And there was a bit of a pause, and he said, I have 2 Rolls-Royces. So,
wow.
So
that was like entering another world.
It was another world, but they were very supportive of me wanting to learn Danish. And being a management training company, he had offices in, by then, about 36 countries around the world. And one of them was the Soviet Union. He was the first Western management trainer to coach the Politburo.
What year are we talking now?
We're talking, that would be the late 80s.
So before it all went...
It was the coup happened in 1991.
That's right,
and
yeah.
I was there when that happened.
Through your connections from Denmark, is that what made you move to Russia?
It was through the connections.
Oh,
I decided to study Russian when I lived in Copenhagen.
Okay. As well as learning Danish?
I learnt Danish first
Okay.
to university level and passed the exam, which allowed me to go to the Slavic Institute of Copenhagen. So then I know it's mad. I look back and I just wonder what the hell I was thinking.
You were just ricocheting. You didn't know what you wanted to do, so you went to one job and I'll ricochet. I mean, that's actually not a bad way of doing it. It's a bit like when you travel, isn't it? Some people meticulously plan where they're going to go on holiday, and some people just turn up and see what happens. And that seems to be what you started doing.
And I cook like that as well. Some people follow recipes, and I don't. I just like to see how it pans out. So.
Okay, well, that'll make your dinner party interesting. And at that particular stage, you hadn't picked up a paintbrush ever?
I picked up. I mean, I was fairly applied at school. I mean,
Right.
and actually, art was my best grade that I got. My mother was very creative. She was actually a painter herself. She never managed to make it to professional kind of level, but I was very inspired by her. But
So the seeds were sown. They just had to wait for them to come up.
They were there. They were bubbling, and I'd kind of suppressed them, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you got into it, and you studied Russian in Denmark?
I did, yes, and I was struggling, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
I remember day one in the language laboratory when I got to the institute. We were sitting in these little cubicles, and you couldn't see your fellow colleagues. You just had the tutor at the top of the class, and some headphones and a little speaker that you could communicate with the teacher. And I remember looking at the instructions, and I thought, God, I don't recognise this. It's not Danish. So I called my tutor and I said, look, I really don't. I'm struggling here. I can't even begin. And she said, oh yes, that's because the instructions are in Swedish. So once she explained to me that titta, lyssna, se efter was look, listen, and repeat, then I was flying then.
So you learnt Swedish as well?
Well, it's actually all I can say in Swedish.
Did you envisage then that you might be some sort of linguist or use your foreign language in your career?
It did occur to me, and actually that is why I focused on Russian at the time, because when I was doing my leaving certificate, my equivalent of A-levels in Ireland, there was a lot of Gorbachev and Reagan in the news, perestroika, glasnost. So for me, it was keeping my options open, that if I did something that could possibly lead to United Nations translator or something, I might have disappointed my parents that I didn't become a United Nations translator.
But through learning Russian, you had set in your mind that Russia was a place you wanted to be.
I was fascinated by it, and I think the Danes were fascinated by it. So having that introduction through my Danish friends, because the first time I travelled to Moscow, I travelled twice in the same summer prior to the coup happening.
Did you have to travel there as part of your degree? Did they actually encourage you to go to
They very much encouraged
Union?
it. They very much encouraged it, but I just simply wouldn't have been allowed, were it not for the strings that were pulled with this management training company who arranged for an invitation for me. You had to be formally invited. It may be the case today. You need what's called a приглашение. It's a formal invitation, and you can only travel to that one area, and that one area only. And
you did?
They got me by train. I travelled by train from Copenhagen, Berlin, Prague, and then at the border. I mean, it really is like something out of a film, because it was late at night in this place called Vyborg, which was the border between the west and the east. And
were Smiley's people there to get you across?
It was, well, there were Alsatians barking in the dark, and they raised the train off its gauge, because the Soviet Union operates a different train gauge. So you are hoisted up into the air, I don't know how many feet, but very high up in the dark with all these dogs barking around you, and it really does make you feel quite nervous. To this day I hate going through customs. I start to get very sweaty hands and feel like I've done something wrong.
Well, we'll find out what you discovered on the other side after we played your first piece of music. You've chosen Nikita by Elton John. Why that particular piece of music?
I thought of Nikita because there was an extraordinary moment when I was in the Soviet Union. I was in the very busy metro station one day, just commuting from one place to another. And back then, rather than an MP3 or an iPhone, I had my Walkman with me, and I was listening to Nikita. And as I was watching all these dour Russians cheek by jowl in this place, obviously the words of Nikita, I just couldn't believe my ears that I was listening to this song and actually sitting in this very hot, sweaty metro with all these Russians.
There you go, a bit of Nikita Nikita by Elton John. That is the one of the music choices of Laura Cramer, Irish-born and Moscow-trained artist. Actually, probably best known to people here in Bristol because you did a lot of work with the Grand Appeal, the Grommet Appeal, didn't you?
I did, yes.
What were you? Did you do a painting for it? Or
I painted several of their large grommets. I painted two of my own designs.
Which ones did you do?
I designed and painted Vincent van Grommet.
Vincent van Grommet. Did you come up with Were you given Vincent van Grommet, or did you come up with that?
No, that was very much my idea in about 3 weeks of sleepless nights trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Did you start with Vincent van Grommet and then decide how you're going to do it, or did it take you 3 weeks to think,
Actually,
Eureka! Vincent van Grommet!
Well, I have to be honest, he actually came to me within 10 minutes of thinking...
In a dream?
Pretty much in a dream. Good old Vincent. But no, I wanted to do a grommet of an artist, someone who I just felt, that I could identify with. And I looked at Grommet, I had him on the internet, an image of Grommet, and I thought, right, what could I do? And I looked at this ear, and I just thought, well, actually, I could do Starry Night on his jacket and his sunflowers on his feet, and then a bandage on his ear, and a very sad, misunderstood look on his face. So,
wow. Now, we just left you, before we went to Nikita, suspended in a train on the border to the Soviet Union, feeling a bit insecure. What happened when you got over the border?
Well, got over the border. The first time I travelled to the Soviet Union was with some Canadian friends. So if I fast forward to the second time, in fact, one of those friends that I travelled with the first time ended up to be my husband a year later. Is
he still your husband?
He is.
Okay,
he is. I better check with him, actually. Yeah, I better check.
Is he likely to be listening?
He will be, I think. Or he might be making breakfast.
Is he Russian?
His parents are Russian.
Okay.
And he was born and raised in Argentina.
Wow.
And in the 80s they moved to Canada. So he's pretty confused, as are our children, really.
Sure. Peter Ustinov used to describe himself as ethnically filthy, which I thought was it's a lovely phrase, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What sort of institution did you get married in? That would be confusing, wouldn't it?
Funnily enough, we wanted to. It was very meaningful to to Miguel's parents that we were married in a Russian Orthodox church, and we had the opportunity to do so. So we did. But then when we went back to the West, we both returned to Ireland, and we went straight to the Registrar General and said, look, we've been married in the West, we've been married in a church in Moscow, we'd like to get our civil marriage certificate, what can you do for us? And this rather nasty Registrar General looked at us almost as if she had a little mission on her hands, and she said, you've been married before and you want to get married again? And we explained the situation. He said, well, no, you would be committing bigamy. You can't do that.
Well, even if you marry the same person again?
You'd think, yeah, absolutely. So he said, well, it was a religious ceremony that meant something to my husband's parents, and therefore, we just understand that in France you can do that. Why couldn't we do it here? And she said, no, you've got to prove that what you went through wasn't legally binding, otherwise you can't get married. So we got our local MP involved, and it was a failed attempt to get basically the Soviet administration to look for something that didn't exist in their files, which was the fact that we hadn't been legally recognised, even though we went through the ceremony. In the end, it took the Foreign Minister of Ireland to pull strings, and about 6 months later, we finally got paperwork through to say, yeah, it's true, they don't exist in the files. It was the most bizarre scenario.
Peculiar, isn't it? You might expect that sort of thing to happen in Russia, but actually for it to have happened in...
That was the irony. That was the irony. It was...
So your time presumably in Russia was wonderful, because you met your future husband.
Yes.
But what made you become an artist? What was the thing that happened?
What happened, if I now backtrack... no, I'm still on the same course, actually.
Okay.
It's my second trip to the Soviet Union that summer, and I'm with Danish friends. But they were just going to travel with me for a short while, and I was then going to stay for 5 months to further my studies through this management training company who had an office in Moscow. Okay. So I was going to travel with them and then stay. But what happened when we returned to the Soviet Union, it was August, and the coup happened. And we weren't in any danger, but the management training company that were going to be my host for those few months felt that it was too dangerous for me to stay there. So they pulled the plug on my work experience and said, look, it's too dangerous. Go home. We just can't afford to have you here. So I was panicking because I had to sit an exam, and I knew that I would fail it if I didn't just brush up my Russian. So I ended up, a very dear friend of mine, Irina, said, look, history's being made. You'd be a fool if you left now. Stay with me, stay with us. You can live with my family. And I lived on a roll-up mattress in a sitting room, tiny little apartment. They're all very, very tiny. I lived in this little place for the remainder of August through to Christmas, or just before Christmas. But she was part of an artist community. She was secretary to an artist called Yuri Koval, and I ended up working with Yuri Koval.
Was he a well-known artist?
He was known more as a writer of children's books, and he was an entertainer. He played the guitar, and he painted, and he sculpted. He was a very loved man. Sadly, he is now dead, but he
inspired you.
He did, and I think he was quite intrigued that this foreigner would suddenly appear and not know what to do with her life. I had this time that I had to fill, and I suddenly realised, being in his studio and watching him work, that was the little piece of the puzzle that I felt was missing for me. And
fast forward us to now, I mean, presumably those are your roots in starting now, but where has your painting taken you? What are you doing at the moment?
I've been trying to take things fairly slow, in the sense that raising my kids is very important to me, and being an artist is a very selfish, for want of a better word, it is a very selfish career. Actually, Barbara Hepworth, bless her, fostered out her kids for the good of her trade, which is something that I think is terribly sad that she had to do that. But I have been cutting my teeth on Bristol cityscapes. I am drawn to an industrial cityscape, probably from my Moscow days. So I've been studying Bristol, and my scenes at Bristol I think are fairly well known. And there are other things that I enjoy doing. I have a Flower Girl series of work, which is when I'm fed up of painting architecturally themed work. I'm very inspired by my garden, and I like to paint these kind of contemplative feminine portraits. I suppose they're autobiographical, really, but I feel a need to do that.
Are your kids old enough to be interested in what you're doing?
They are. They're very critical. They are my best critics, and I actually do want to get feedback from them whenever I'm working on a painting, and they're amazing.
You've chosen You're Surveying by Carly Simon as your second piece of music. Why that one?
Well, I love this song. I think I would defy anyone not to sing along at a party to this song. I think the gritted teeth through which Carly Simon must have written this song, apparently about Warren Beatty, is quite amusing. I love the sentiment.
Yes, indeed. You're listening to BBC Radio Bristol. It's almost 25 minutes to 10. My dinner party guest is Laura Cramer, Irish-born, Moscow-trained artist. We were talking about her time in Moscow, meeting her husband, and meeting her mentor, Yuri Koval. Of all the stuff that Yuri told you about how to be an artist, what stuff has stuck with you? What inspires you when you're thinking, golly, what shall I paint today?
Well, the main thing he taught me was to paint what you see and a little bit more. Just put that little quirky twist in it.
Well, that's a good phrase, isn't it? Paint what you see and a little bit more.
And in Russian it's «Рисую то, что ты видишь, и еще чуть-чуть».
Yeah, I knew that. And that's what you do. So you see something, you think, oh, I can do that, and then you...
What it is, I think, is to look at a view. I'm drawn to a view, not every view, but I mean, obviously I find compositions that interest me, and I go and I think, right, how can I put my own little twist on that so that it's not a photograph, I admire representational painting a lot, and I do try and paint representationally just to keep my hand in. But the abstraction, I think, is the fun bit.
Didn't Yuri also tell you that you couldn't be a painter and have children?
He did.
A red rag to a bull. Look what you've done.
It was a red rag to a bull. In a way, I'm very grateful for him for saying it. I was a little bit miffed at the time and definitely confused, but he did. He said that, and sadly, he has now passed away. But those words echo in my ears.
So the thing is that it may have been true if you were living in a country where most people lived to their mid-50s or maybe 60.
Yeah.
And they drank and smoked and went early.
Yes.
Most people now, you will quite easily live to 80 probably.
Absolutely.
And you might do your best painting when you're 70. You'd be glad of something to do when the kids have gone.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to that. At least I didn't decide to become a sportswoman. I'm hoping
Yes.
that my best years are ahead of me.
Yeah, actually very cleverly chosen. So your career path is ahead of you.
Yes.
But first, before you can get your canvas out again, you've got to have your dinner party. Who's your first guest going to be?
My first guest is going to be the food writer and chef Nigel Slater.
That's not some sneaky way of getting you out of the cooking, is it? You've already
Absolutely.
said that you just sort of wing it a bit with your cooking.
Absolutely. No,
So
I
you're
hate following
expecting him to
recipes.
come and bring the food or help you
I
in the
reckon.
kitchen?
Well, I love when Nigel opens his fridge and he has a little bit of a rummage at leftovers and thinks, right, what can I make?
Do you
of that?
believe that? Do you think it's all genuine? Because we don't really believe anything we watch on the
I
television these
know,
days. Do you think
no.
Nigel's just a bloke? Well, you'd find out, wouldn't you? You just walk in there.
I would find out. He may just have a tin of beans ready to open, but no. I've fallen for the fact that he's got a wonderful kitchen garden in his where he lives.
Would you hold it in his kitchen garden then, rather than your own?
No. I want to have my own. I want to aspire to
Indeed.
having my
I
own
once
kitchen
did
garden.
something for the BBC, and golly, I can't remember the name of the chef's surname. James, what's his name? He's the huge, tall bloke, Yorkshireman, came and cooked for us, and we were talking about healthy eating.
Yeah.
James Martin, I think.
Martin.
And he was horrified by our utensils on our frying pan. There were all sorts of stuff that we didn't have, clearly.
Yeah.
We'd had the kitchen done, so the kitchen had been done up, so it looked quite nice, but our utensils were shocking and our knives weren't sharp enough, and it was
Well-
all faintly embarrassing. You're not going to fall into that trap with...
Well, it's funny you should say about sharp knives because it's one of my pet peeves, and my husband actually gets the angle grinder as our kitchen knives to make them sharp. And people think that a sharp knife is dangerous, but actually a blunt knife is far more dangerous than a
Yes.
sharp knife.
What's dangerous is having a dishwasher that pulls out and has the cutlery drawer there, so the knives are poking up.
Yeah.
So kids can fall over onto the knives. I've seen that happen in
Good
so
Lord,
that's-
really?
So I would choose a dishwasher with where the sharp cutlery goes up the top shelf.
Amazing.
A little bit of public information for you
Thank
there.
you for that, Dr. Phil.
So anyway, you have Nigel Slater. Of all the chefs you could have chosen, why did you choose him?
I chose him because I love the simplicity. When he cooks, it is just about simple love of food and flavours. And I read his book, Toast, and thought it was an amazing story, life story, and the fact that he obviously gets a lot of emotional satisfaction from just putting some flavours together. I'm not particularly... I can't identify with someone like Heston Blumenthal. I would love to go to his restaurant, but to cook like Heston, it's
So you're
too
a chemistry teacher,
sciencey.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it would have to be Nigel rather.
Would you be brave enough to have Nigel just rummage through whatever you happen to have in your
I have
kitchen?
some very
so you
nice
can-
leftovers.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I
But you
think-
wouldn't mind him having a look? You've got no guilty secrets in your condiments drawer?
No guilty secrets.
Are you absolutely certain about
No,
that?
and the knives are sharp, so I think he'd be very proud of me.
You haven't got an OXO cube from 1974 in there or anything?
Nope.
No?
Definitely not.
Oh, that's good then. Well, that's good. That's allowing your
I'm quite
kitchen...
OCD, actually. I'm messy, but I am slightly OCD with
Opening
my
your kitchen
ingredients.
up to the scrutiny of a celebrity chef is pretty good. And in terms of company, because he'd be eating with you as well, do you think he'd be good company?
I think he would. I possibly was focusing more on his ability to make food with me or for me, but or send him out to pick the salad.
I think he thinks
but,
he's been invited to a dinner party.
Do you reckon?
So I think you
damn,
might have
okay, perhaps I didn't read the brief properly, but
to... You'll have to tempt him in with a stuffed olive.
no, I think I'll do a little bit of food for him, but
Okay, well, I shall leave you and Nigel discussing how he's going to cook for you while we have a break for Tracy Chapman. Then we'll find out who your next dinner party guest is. There you go, a bit of Tracy Chapman for us. We're sort of one guest into Laura Cramer, the Irish-born Moscow-trained artist, and her dinner party. She already has Nigel Slater in there, who she's delicately negotiated to do the cooking for her. Nicely done. How's that going? Has he agreed? Has he consented?
he's a little bit miffed. But
Okay.
I've just poured him a nice glass of fizz, so I think it'd be all right.
Why don't you get another guest in to delight him?
Right, I am going to invite the Danish writer, comedian and broadcaster Sadie Toksvig.
Oh, wow. Because of your Danish connections, or because you think she's an all-round good egg?
Well, partly. No, she just makes me laugh. I love her. I think she's fab. And the news quiz on a Friday evening, we listen to it on catch-up on a Sunday morning with the kids. And it's my way of staying in touch with what's happening in the world and having a good laugh at the same time.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because she's has quite a serious side to her as well, and she's an unashamed member of the Liberal Democrats or whatever. And
oh, I didn't know that.
Did you not know that?
Well,
it has been for a long time. No, she always apologises for it, and it's very Jeremy Hardy.
Okay, well, apology accepted.
But yeah, she's also, clearly someone who's very bright and thinks quite deeply about things.
Yes.
I've met her a few times. You can do this comedy thing, but actually a lot of comedians often yearn for something more serious in their lives, because when you do comedy, all you're ever doing is seeing a gag in something, boom, 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 which is quite superficial. And the comedy's very good at pointing out problems, but not always at offering solutions. And my experience with Sandy, she's actually got quite a lot of depth as well. She's brilliant, she's very funny, but
I think she'd have
quite deeply about things.
Well, her father, Klaus Toksvig, was a foreign correspondent, and I think probably growing up with a father with that kind of a career would probably make you a fairly deep thinker.
The news quiz itself, it's almost... I prefer it, actually, to Have I Got News For You. Having done both of them, I mean, when I first started doing the news quiz with Alan Corrin, you would turn up, and they wouldn't tell you what was on there. So
really?
Have I Got News For You, they show you the videos, and you sort of got an idea.
Yes,
they don't give you the answers, but you were just straight in there, and you have to be so quick. The reason they are so funny is you have to be, because it's a sort of sink or swim there.
Amazing.
You sort of know what's been in the news that week, you have a feeling what will probably come up, but boom, you're straight in there.
Incredible.
And it's incredible. But obviously some of the stuff when she's presenting it is scripted, but a lot of it is ad-libbed as well, and she's amazingly sharp.
She is. Her guests are wonderful, and that interaction with them is super. It's a great half hour. I hate it when it's over.
Is there anything you particularly want to ask her? Anything about her Danish background or Danish connections?
I did catch the tail end of an interview with her when she was talking about her grandmother. I think she has written a book, which, I mean, it's dreadful to say I haven't read. This. I don't know whether it's an autobiography that she's done, but I think her grandmother was very much part of helping Jewish people escape through Denmark during the war, to the point where her grandmother actually risked her own physical safety, and she became an invalid through injuries that she incurred on her legs. I can't really do justice to the story, but it's something I would like to... the whole point is I'd like Sandy to tell me that story.
She's also written lots of fiction as well, hasn't she?
Yes, and children's books, I understand, as well. So there's just so much to her.
She's
a very busy woman.
Got to be a workaholic.
Yes, so she needs a nice dinner and
I think she would,
chat.
And I think she would actually cheer up Nigel Slater, who's...
Do you reckon? I'm working him too hard.
He's going through your condiments drawer saying, what's that? I'm not sure what that is. OK, so you've got Sandy and you've got Nigel Slater. You're listening to Dr. Phil's Saturday Surgery, 10 minutes to 10. The painter Laura Cramer is my dinner party guest. Lest we forget, tell us about the arts trail that you're involved in, BS9 Arts Trail. What does that involve?
BS9 Arts Trail is coming up on the 10th and the 11th of May. It's a new summer art trail. Most art trails that happen here in Bristol are around October, November time. But it's a small one. It's its first airing, and it's in the North Bristol area of BS9, and there are about 20 venues taking part, and I'm opening my home as one of the venues with two other artist friends, and we'll be selling our wares that weekend. And
semi-abstract oil paintings?
Yes.
Paint what you see and a little
bit more.
And that's
get somebody else to do your cooking for you.
www.cramerpaintings.com.
That's correct.
If people want to see your paintings. So this is a wonderful thing to do, isn't it?
It's fun because I think people enjoy, even if they don't want to buy anything, they get a chance to snoop around your house.
Your house, yeah.
We know that.
In your condiments drawer now, won't they?
They might. I better not have sharp knives that weekend.
Nothing too abstract in there.
No.
Now, we've been talking about your dinner party guests, and you have Nigel Slater and Sandy Toksvig in there. Do you think Danish people really are as happy as they're supposed to be. It's supposed to be one of the happiest places in the world to live, isn't it?
It is. It has been
She's
voted.
obviously a good example.
It's been voted the happiest place in the world, and I think their pastries are just so delicious. I think that's probably one of the reasons it's the happiest place.
Do you think a pastry can give you long-term contentment, or do you think it's a short-term hit?
No, I think it's long-term because they bake them daily, and you can rock up at a bakery at 5 in the morning.
It's as simple as that, is it? The secret of happiness is a pastry every day.
Well, the Danes have a thing called hygge in their lives, and I was quite amused to hear Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall talking about hygge because he went to Scandinavia with his programme Scandimania. And the Danes have this word that essentially means cosy, and that is hygge. But they just celebrate the coziness in any situation. In a way, just sitting here is quite hyggeligt. We're having a hyggely conversation.
Yeah. Did you bring any pastries?
Sadly not. Okay. But I'm going to. Yes. Okay. I'm not very happy with your producer for not producing those. So.
Okay. We'll talk about that later. Now we need to get on to your third guest because we have Nigel Slater, Sandy Toksvig. Who's your third guest going to be?
My third guest is going to be the wonderful Grayson Perry. And
as himself or as Claire?
I love Claire, but I think I'd prefer him as his kind of scruffy, straight out of the studio, unshaven self.
Okay, and if people aren't familiar with him, tell us a bit about him.
I suppose he came to fame winning the Turner Prize. I can't remember now how many years ago. He likes to call himself an artist who also happens to make pots.
Okay.
But he did bring ceramic art to the forefront and kind of quite rightly so, because it's a very undervalued art form. But he did the Wreath Lectures last year as well, and I found them very very inspiring. And I went to his exhibition at the British Museum a couple of years ago, the Tribute to the Unknown Craftsman, where he worked in collaboration with the British Museum, creating artifacts inspired by the artifacts that were there. And walking around this place, you would struggle to see what was a genuine artifact and what was something that Grayson had taken and twisted.
He's clever, isn't he?
He's very clever, and I would insist that he brings a sketchbook with him, because I don't know whether you've noticed, but I've not actually got any painters on my dinner party list, but I think he's a very, very clever man, and I don't think he's... in fact, I think he's very soon becoming a national treasure. A journalist did ask him whether he was just a lovable character or a serious artist, and he was quite taken aback by that, and he said, well, can't I be both? And I think he can.
I think he is. Ceramic vases, cross-dressing, and then the real Grayson Perry. You want him there as himself?
I'd like him there as himself.
Because, you'll get a bit more unvarnished truth? I think so. I just love to hear what he has to throw out at us over the dining table. Do you think he'd get on well with Sandy and Nigel? Because that's quite important. It is important, and I have given thought to that, because I think, yes, you've got to choose guests that will get on, who will get on well together, and I think he will. I think he'll throw a few interesting things into the mix and stir things up a bit, but that's I'm sure it will, nothing that anyone can't. And do you think you might pick up something from him? If we go on the BS9 Arts Channel, we pitch up in your house, could you be in your alter ego as an Argentinian wrestler? I could try, couldn't I? Yeah, some sort of leotard. Can you do that for us? I'll give it some thought. Yeah. Yes, leave that with me. A little fake moustache, I think that would be good. We should all do it with cross-dressing. Never did anyone any harm. Okay, let's get your final guest in there. You have Grayson Perry, Sandy Toksvig, and Nigel Slater. That sounds good. Nigel's actually now acquiesced. He's cooking. Everything's going well. Who's the last guest? My last guest, I'm going to drag her from across the Atlantic, and she's another comedian. You want some laughs then? Obviously. I do want laughs. Okay. I do like a bit of laughter. It's certainly better than the alternative. So Tina Fey. I would like Tina Fey. Why Tina Fey? I think she's very clever. I guess she came to fame impersonating Sarah Palin I can see you smiling already, impersonating Sarah Palin with the McCain Obama campaign. I didn't really know about her prior to that, but she came through the ranks of the Saturday Night Live
show in America, which very frustratingly it's hard to find here on English TV. My husband, who's quite techie, tries to find these programmes, and I don't know whether they actually air it at all, Saturday Night Live.
I don't know whether they do anymore, no. You can probably find YouTube clips.
It's very hard to find it, but no, she was actually, the New Yorker called her the sex symbol for every man who can read without moving their lips. So I thought that was quite funny, that she's obviously a very clever girl.
Yeah, what I like about her is I like it when really clever, intense people do comedy, like Stuart Lee. Stuart Lee is one of my favourite comedians,
right.
But he's a bit Marmite, because he's just so clever, and everybody knows he's clever. But you have this slightly pretentious thing when you're a comedian, is that you think as well as making people laugh, you can be an agent of social change or something, and people get very high on their horse. But that actually, what she did to Sarah Palin and her election chances, it did. A little bit like the old caricatures of politicians. Cartoonists could really stuff up a politician. Yeah. The way we used to portray John Major, all grey with his underpants on the outside, eating peas.
Exactly.
You can, through comedy, you can probably influence politics, I think, and probably change people's behaviour.
I think you probably can, and I think Sarah Palin's parents apparently went to a gig of Tina Fey's and introduced themselves, and so it was quite interesting that they felt quite comfortable doing that.
What a fantastic dinner party lineup! That's going to go with a bang, isn't it?
Well, thank you. I hope so.
Excellent. Are you going to allow your husband in, and your kids? Are they coming in, or are they not allowed in?
Well, my husband and I are incompatible in the kitchen. He's a great cook, but we cook in very different ways. But if there's room, I'll let them in.
Okay, we'll pass over that quickly. And finally, remind us, if people want to find out about your work, your website is?
It's www.cramerpaintings.com.
Do you do commissions?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
And also the Arts Trail is on the 10th and 11th of May, and the website for that is bs9arts.co.uk.
It is.
Thank you, Laura. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Come and see us again soon when you've got more stuff to say. To take us up to the news in our medical hour, we're going to be talking about a new drug for breast cancer, which NICE says is too expensive for the NHS. To take us there, here's Elton John and Kiki D.